comic book fans, Kevin Gibbon with you once again with another episode of Comic Let's Talk. Before we begin, I want to mention that I also do comic book reviews on the Comics for Sinners website as well as Comic Crusaders. So check both sites out, check out my reviews, let me know what you think. If you love comics as much as I do, you're going to subscribe to my channel. I review comics for Comic Crusaders. I also have my own franchises, Adolescent Radioactive Samurai Platypi and Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter. They're available on Comics Central, Indie Planet, and Comixology. Check them out. Stay tuned to this broadcast for more information. Also, like the Facebook pages for each franchise. Check out my Patreon site for some neat original artwork and shows that you won't find on YouTube. Hey comic book fans, Kevin Gibbon with you once again. We're going to talk about comic book artist Ernie Colon, who tragically passed away just recently on August 8, 2019. He was born July 13th in 1931, an American comics artist known for his wide-ranging career illustrating children's superhero and horror comics, as well as mainstream nonfiction. Colon was born in Puerto Rico and raised in the mainland U.S. from age 10. He has 8 siblings, all sisters. His early influences included newspaper adventure strip writer artists Milton Caniff and Will Eisner, and the humorous 1940s Fawcett comic superhero Captain Marvel. I never enjoyed superheroes, with the exception of the early Captain Marvel. That character had humor and didn't take itself as seriously as all the other snarling, furious products of DC and Marvel, Collins said back in 2011. Looking at his career, he began his professional career at Harvey Comics as a letterer. He later worked uncredited as an artist on titles included Richie Rich, Casper the Friendly Ghost, and others. At Harvey, he met Sid Jacobson, who became his editor and frequent creative partner. His first confirmed credited work was penciling and inking the 2-page story Kaleidoscope of Fear in Whammo Giant Comics #1, cover dated April 1967. Published by the toy company Whammo, he drew 3 issues of Gold Key Comics' Dr. Solar, Man of the Atom, numbers 24 through 26, and did much work for Warren Publishing's black and white horror comics magazines Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella. In 1979, he collaborated with writer Roger McKenzie on an adaptation of Battlestar Galactica for Marvel Comics. At DC Comics, Colin co-created the historical fantasy Arak, Son of Thunder with Roy Thomas. The character was introduced in a special insert in the Warlord number 48 in August of '81. 2 years later, he introduced Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, with writers Dan Mishkin and Gary Cohn on a similar preview in the Legion of Superheroes Volume 2, number 298, back in '83. Colin was an editor for DC Comics from 1982 to 1985, and oversaw titles such as Arion, Lord of Atlantis, The Flash, Green Lantern, and Wonder Woman. His other artistic credits include Grim Ghost for Atlas Seaboard Comics, Airboy for Eclipse Comics, Magnus Robot Fighter for Valiant Comics, and Damage Control and Doom 2099 for Marvel Comics. Also for Marvel, Colin wrote, drew, and colored and lettered the 1988 science fiction graphic novel Axe. In the late 1980s, Colin penciled the short-lived Bullwinkle and Rocky series for Marvel's children's imprint Star Comics, edited by Sid Jacobson. Colin returned to Harvey with Jacobson in the early 1990s and worked on such projects as Monster in My Pocket and Ultraman. From 2005 until the tabloid's demise in 2007, he drew the weekly comic strip Spy Cat in the Weekly World News. Colin and Jacobson created a graphic novel version of the 911 Commission report titled The 911 Report, a Graphic Adaptation, back in 2006. They released a 160-page follow-up after 911, America's War on Terror, August 2008. The duo's A Graphic Biography, She, was released in 2009. The following year, Ferrer, Strauss, and Guiraud published their next collaboration, Anne Frank, the Anne Frank House Authorized Graphic Biography, published by Hill and Wang. He illustrated The Great American Documents, Volume 1 by Ruth Ashby, published by Hill and Wang in 2014. Colin reunited with writer Dan Mishkin to produce the Warren Commission Report, a graphic investigation into the Kennedy assassination, in 2014. Back in 1995, he worked on Dreadstar. Dreadstar was the first comic book series published by American publisher Epic Comics, an imprint of Marvel Comics, in 1982. It was centered on Vanth Dreadstar, sole survivor of the entire Milky Way galaxy, and an ensemble cast of crewmates including cyborg sorcerer Ziggy Darklaw, and their struggle to end an ancient war between 2 powerful evil empires, the Church of the Instrumentality, run by the Lord Popple, and the Monarchy, administered by a puppet king. The comic book created by Jim Starlin was bi-monthly during most of its run. Epic published 26 issues, after which it was published by First Comics, who carried it for 38 more issues, for a total of 64 issues. The first 41 issues were published bi-monthly, after which the book was published monthly for a time, though it resumed bi-monthly publication with issue 51 in the early 1990s. A 6-issue limited series was published by Malibu Comics' Bravura line of creator-owned titles. Jim Starlin had stated in interviews as early as 2000 that he was working on a new Dreadstar series called Class Warfare, including sample artwork and slave labor graphics. The price trade paperback, but the last mention of this was in 2002. In 2011, a promotion for Breed 3, Starlin again mentioned the possibility of another Dreadstar series. The Malibu series takes place several years later, with the Lord High Popple training Vanth Dreadstar's daughter, Kalaya. The characters from the original series, except Odie, show up, and the series climaxes in Dreadstar apparently being accidentally killed by his own daughter. In issue number 6, the final issue, Dreadstar is alive and back to his old self at the end of the story. Image Comics would go on to produce several Dreadstar comics in Breed 3, number 5, and in issue number 6, along with other of Starlin's creations, such as Word and Kid Cosmos as part of the Elsewhere Alliance. The story also explains where Odie disappeared to during the last Dreadstar miniseries. On February 17, 2015, Starlin teamed up with Universal Cable Productions to adapt Dreadstar as a scripted TV series with Chris Bender and J.C. Spink as producers. In 2007, Ernie Colon gave an interview with The Last Kiss, John Lustig. Here are some highlights from that interview. John asks, "Occasionally I hear some established creators not being able to get work because editors think they're too old. You're what, 70 now? Have you run into any of this ageism at all?" Ernie responded, "I think it's a more unconscious thing. The comic book industry is just like any other business. There are lots of cronies in it. To put it more gently, I'd call it palism. You have a group of friends you grew up with and go through high school and college with. You make those connections. When you get into a position of editorship, you're going to call those people, rather than someone like myself or even really great cartoonists like Gray Moreau. I mention him because before his death, he wasn't able to get any work at all." John says that's insane. Ernie replies, "It is insane, and I have to believe that it is not deliberate. So often these younger people would look at Gray's work and they didn't hire him because they were too busy hiring other people. I've had the experience of doing a character and having the editor admit that I did the best version of that character, yet they won't use me. When I investigate a little further, I find they've got some friend in there. And that's just the way it is." John states, "I suppose you reach some point where the editors you know have moved on and retired, but it still seems a little nuts. Personally, I find it's a real thrill to be working with established talents like, Dick Giordano, Dan DeCarlo." Ernie says, "When I was an editor for DC, I hired an artist that, when I was a kid, I admired tremendously. That was George Tuska. When George walked in the room, I actually got tongue-tied and didn't tell him I'd read his books. And what a big favorite he was of mine. I was so happy to hire him. His age had nothing to do with it. When he walked in, he was quite elderly then. Actually, he was probably the age that I am now. I'm old, but I'll be elderly in about 15 minutes. Ernie continues to say, "I suppose I can keep the fantasy going until I drop dead. But my fantasy is that I want to be big enough so that I don't have to worry about stuff like that. I often compare that to finding a $100 bill on the street. It's wonderful, but it doesn't change your life. There are things that I want to do that will change my life, whether it's the Doodle movies or other things that I have going that I hope to market." Colon also worked on Valiant Comics' version of Magnus Robot Fighter, numbers 7, 9, and 13 through 16, also issue number 20, that's from 1991 through 1993. Magnus Robot Fighter is a fictional comic book superhero created by writer-artist Russ Manning in 1963. Magnus first appeared in Magnus Robot Fighter 4000 AD, number 1, published by Gold Key Comics in February 1963. The character was subsequently published by Valiant Comics and Acclaim Comics in the 1990s, and was reintroduced by Dark Horse Comics in August 2010. In every incarnation, Magnus is a human who battles rogue robots in the year 4000, though some aspects of the concept have varied with each publisher. The premise of the series states that by the year 4000, humanity has become dependent on robots. H8, the Paul Robb, robot police chief of the Civic Center center of North Am, a continent-spanning megacity, is damaged in a radiation accident. It seeks to promote the human dependency on robots and gradually impose totalitarian rule in the area under its control. Magnus was raised by a robot known as 1A, a name which implies that he is the very first robot of his type ever manufactured. 1A seems to be self-aware and possesses emotions. A firm believer in the 3 laws of robotics, 1A recognized the threat represented by the dependency of humans on robots in general, and the developments in North Am due to H8 in particular. Therefore, 1A trained Magnus to protect humans against both rogue robots and humans who use normal robots for evil purposes. Magnus was trained from infancy by 1A in an undersea domed house, using advanced techniques to become a skilled martial artist who could break steel with his bare hands. In addition, 1A equipped his charge with a device that would allow him to hear robot-to-robot radio communications. Leisha is Magnus' girlfriend. Robots that served as police are called Paul Robs, as in police robots, and are painted black and white like city police cars. All robots have identifying numbers painted on their chest and backs. Other robots, such as taxi drivers, could be nothing more than a torso with arms and a head attached to a flying automobile. Both the Gold Key and Valiant versions take place in North Am, a megalopolis that encompasses the entire North American continent. The city consists of several levels. The higher levels are populated by wealthier individuals, often regarded as soft and complacent. The lowest level, the Goth level, is populated by a hardier and less educated class known as Goths. Aside from North Am, Earth also features a continent-wide city in Europe and a city on the continent of Antarctica named Antarcto. The city consists of transparent domes, inside each of which the climate is carefully controlled. Construction of these habitats was fiercely opposed for fear of ecological damage to fragile Antarctic system. As well, there is the area known as Himalaya, which apparently includes the least all of India and China. By AD 4000, the nation of Japan is home to 50 billion people. The major islands of Japan are covered by a single contiguous structure known as the host. Grandmother, a free will electronic network, controls virtually every facet of daily life. In the original series, titled Magnus Robot Fighter 4000 AD in 1963, it was written and drawn by Russ Manning, and as a nod to its influences included Isaac Asimov's The 3 Laws of Robotics, as a quote in the beginning of the first issue. For the duration of the title's original run, Magnus battled rogue robots, aliens, space pirates, and other threats. He fell in love with Leisha Klein, the daughter of one of the North Am senators. Leisha developed limited telepathic abilities after training by Marie and other humans who had acquired them as a result of their minds being linked together while imprisoned in suspended animation by H8. The series was popular in the 1960s. As the 70s approached, sales began to decline. The last issue, number 46, was published in January 1977. However, Manning only completed 21 issues. The rest were reprints of previous issues or new stories by others, numbers 23 through 28. The original concept is a deliberate inversion or update of the Tarzan mythos, the syndicated comic strip which Russ Manning had previously illustrated, where Tarzan was a human raised by a noble savage, feral child by African great apes. In 1991, Jim Shooter obtained the rights to 3 Gold Key characters: Dr. Solar, Man of the Atom, Arak Son of Stone, and Magnus Robot Fighter. He intended to use these characters to launch his new comic book line, Valiant Comics. Several months later, the company launched Magnus Robot Fighter. The series began with the original one left off. The artist took great care to replicate the setting and trappings of the original stories, but as the new series progressed, it began to deviate from the original concept. The term free wills appeared in the Valiant run, introducing the concept that the rogue robots seen previously were not simply the product of random malfunctions, but were the result of a common phenomenon which allowed robots to become sentient. While some of them are malevolent, others merely want to be free. It was also learned that 1A is a free will. With Magnus' help, a colony of benevolent free wills is established called the Steel Nation. At the same time, Magnus becomes disgusted with North Am's elite. He journeys to the lower levels of North Am and befriends a group of social outcasts known as Goths. In 1992, Valiant published the popular crossover Predator vs. Robot Fighter. Valiant President Steven Masarsky recounted, "We started this project in February, knowing that the time of the year John Ostrander would be taking things over in Magnus, so we wanted to generate renewed interest in Magnus. As this series progressed, it was used to introduce other heroes to the Valiant universe. In issue number 5, a Japanese hero known as Rai began appearing in Magnus' title and would eventually move on to his own series. In the 6th issue, the future version of Solar made his debut. The issue also introduced spider aliens, who became a recurring threat throughout the Valiant universe. In the 12th issue, modern readers were reintroduced to Arak, Son of Stone.